gotta have a chat about the Bakersfield duo. They're two physicians who run urgent care clinics in California. And they've gotten all this attention for this viral video that they're in. This was just such a sneaky video. They use a lot of the right numbers, but in the completely wrong way. So you really had to be paying attention in order to catch them in their lies. They claim that we've been totally overreacting with respect to quarantining and physical distancing for COVID-19. And they also dismiss COVID-19 as being really similar to the flu. Now they make a lot of other claims, but I'm gonna focus on these two big ones for this video. So let's dive in with a clip that was towards the beginning of the video where they're talking about the situation in California where they're based.
So if we look at California, these numbers are from yesterday. We have 33,865 COVID cases out of a total of 280,900 total tested. That's 12% of Californians were positive for COVID. We have 39.5 million people.
Okay, so far that seems pretty accurate. I couldn't verify exactly which day they recorded this on, but the numbers roughly check out. But then,
if we just take a basic calculation and extrapolate that out.
Oh no, don't do that, no.
That equates to about 4.7 million cases throughout the state of California.
No.
Which means this thing is widespread. That's the good news.
Here's what I have to say about their basic calculation.
Yeah, basic.
The number he ends up with of 4.7 million presumed cases in California is not correct. It's not even a good estimate. His logic was, okay, if 12% of all people we tested for COVID-19 came back positive, then we could also just extrapolate that 12% of the general population is also positive. But no, dude, you can't do that, no. The people being tested are not a random sample of the general population. In fact, in most places, including where he is in California, only those with the most severe symptoms are being tested. That means that your testing rate is biased to be higher in your testing population than it is in the general population. He kept claiming he was just following the numbers and doing good science, but that is not good science. It's basically the same as if someone, I don't know, went to Comic-Con and asked people at Comic-Con, hey, do you like comic books? I'm just guessing here, but let's say 99% of people at Comic-Con would answer yes, I like comic books. What he did is then equivalent to saying, well, 99% of people in the world do in fact like comic books. A percentage is just another way of representing a fraction, and so it's super dependent on the denominator or the sample population. If your sample population is biased, any extrapolation you make with that percentage is too. And that's what we see for positive rates of COVID-19 testing. This positive test rate or percentage is gonna be different depending what city, state, or country you're looking at. Where I am in Canada, our country's nationwide positive test rate is about 6.4%. And in my province of Ontario, it's about 6.1%. And again, we're still being limited with who we test. People with more mild symptoms aren't getting tested. Now, if we compare these numbers with South Korea, a place that's doing much more broad testing, sampling a lot more of the population, their positive test rate for COVID-19 is about 1.8%. All of this tells us that the percentage of people who will test positive for COVID-19 is completely dependent on who is being tested and who isn't. And that is why his basic calculation using the 12% positive test rate applied to the general population made no sense. And the number he ended up with of 4.7 million presumed cases in California is a huge overestimation. And now, look what he does with that very incorrect number.
We've seen 1,227 deaths in the state of California with a possible incidence or prevalence of 4.7 million. That means you have a 0.03 chance of dying from COVID-19 in the state of California.
If that extrapolation is legit.
It's not.
So this is wrong because you can't do this, which makes this wrong too.
What he's really trying to calculate here is the case fatality ratio, or the percentage of infected cases that result in a fatality or death. He used the right equation for case fatality ratio, which is number of total deaths over total infected cases times 100%. But he plugged in the wrong denominator, that 4.7 million, which we already discussed is a huge overestimate. And because he's using a way larger denominator than what he should be, he ends up with a way smaller case fatality ratio of just 0.03%. You can think of the denominator like the number of slices in a pie. The more you slice it, the smaller the piece you end up with. Now, he's not wrong that the case fatality ratio for COVID-19 is pretty low, which is great. That means lots of people recover and survive. But it's not that low. In fact, most experts are estimating it'll end up around 0.3 to 0.9%. We can't know confidently for sure because we're still trying to tally up and figure out all of the deaths out there.
So I want to look at New York State. We extrapolate data, we test people, and then we extrapolate for the entire community based on the numbers. We tested 649,000 people. That's a massive test. That's accurate data, 39%. So if they tested the whole state, would we indeed have 7.5 million cases? We don't know. We will never test the entire state. So we extrapolate out. We use the data we have because it's the most accurate we have.
It's not.
Versus a predictive model that have been nowhere in the ballpark of accurate.
Okay, bud, the models are predictive and they've changed as we've gotten new information, as they should. They've also come with confidence intervals and ranges, so I'd argue they have been in the ballpark. But anyway, carry on and show us this whole new way you have of calculating the death rate in New York State.
How many deaths do they have? 19,410 out of 19 million people, which is a 0.1% chance of dying from COVID in the state of New York.
So forget everything I said before because now he's completely changing the way he calculates the death rate. I guess dividing by an overinflated number of total cases wasn't good enough for him. Now he's just dividing by the total number of people in New York State. That does not make sense. Like, if you're gonna lie, at least be consistent. I want to break down one other claim he makes because it's a pretty common one. He starts, of course, with another bogus calculation, I think this time using the positive test rates for COVID-19 from the entire United States, and then he uses that to extrapolate the total number of presumed cases, and he does that so he can compare the severity of COVID-19 with that of the flu.
328 million people times 19.6 is 64 million. That's a significant amount of people with COVID. It's similar to the flu. If you study the numbers in 2017 and 2018.
Oh, I did.
We had 50 to 60 million with the flu. We had a similar death rate.
Not quite, but I'll let you finish.
In the deaths in the United States were 43,545. Similar to the flu of 2017, 2018.
The numbers he shares here suggest a case fatality ratio or death rate of about 0.07% for COVID-19 across all of America. According to the CDC, for 2018 to 2019, the case fatality ratio for the flu was about 0.13%. But again, he gets a really low case fatality ratio or death rate for COVID-19 because he's using a very biased percentage based off the positive testing rate that's mostly looking at more severe cases. So he's really over-exaggerating the total number of cases out there, making the death rate look a lot smaller than it really is. It's pretty low, but it's not that low. And when it comes to people's lives, the difference matters. Not to mention how he totally oversimplifies and is just sharing all these averages that completely dismiss the disparities in the death rates faced by people in different age categories and people of color. There's so much inequity of healthcare that he just waves away with a crappy argument and over-exaggerated numbers.
We always have between 37 and 60,000 deaths in the United States every single year.
Yeah, that's true.
No pandemic talk, no shelter in place, no shutting down of businesses, no sending doctors home.
Look, here's why all of the arguments comparing COVID-19 to the flu are tired. Both infections are pretty bad and tend to be a lot worse than the common cold. But both infections should also, in theory, be pretty manageable if hospitals aren't over capacity. Here's the thing about COVID-19 though, it hit during flu season. So sure, maybe the flu on its own is manageable, and maybe a flu-like thing, if you really want to call COVID-19 that, maybe that on its own is manageable. But two of them at the same time are not, and that is why we needed to physically distance and stay home as much as possible to slow the spread of this virus, and why we still do. That's what flattening the curve is all about. Now, is it great that we canceled a lot of surgeries and procedures that were deemed less urgent? No, absolutely not. It's a huge issue and tons of people are suffering. But I hope the takeaway lesson is more policies for better healthcare infrastructure. That way, the next time there's some sort of epidemic, we're ready with separate facilities to deal with that epidemic or pandemic, and then different facilities to keep giving people continued access to the care that they need.
We have a flu vaccine. How many people even get the flu vaccine? The flu is dangerous. It kills people. So just because you have a vaccine doesn't mean it's going to be everywhere. And it doesn't mean everyone's going to take it, because we see every year that we have a vaccine, and I would say probably 50% of the public doesn't even want it.
You know what? I kind of agree with him on this one. According to the CDC, about 34% of adults aged 18 to 49 got the flu vaccine last year, and that was the lowest vaccination rate of any age category, which is pretty sad considering that that's the least vulnerable demographic. I hope that can be a stat that changes this upcoming flu season. At the end of the day, don't believe something someone says just because they have fancy letters at the end of their name or they're in scrubs. If they're pushing credentials on you and being overly assertive, in my books, that's a red flag. Next time you see something like that, especially if it's someone, I don't care who, going against what so many public health experts are saying, please reconsider spending your social currency on social media sharing it. And if you end up deciding that you do want to share it, before you do that, try looking up if the opposite thing is true, and don't look for what individuals are saying. Try to get a sense of what consensus is, what majority of people are saying. While it is sometimes true that an individual is correct against all of the majority, it's pretty rare, and if their evidence is spotty, they're probably not the exception. Thanks so much for watching. Please feel free to discuss and ask me any questions that you have in the comments, and if you found this helpful, give it a share.